The morning sun cast long shadows across New Busan's research facility when Dr. Kim Subin first detected the massive energy signatures approaching from deep space. She had been studying soil samples from the planet's northern continent, hoping to find traces of rare minerals that could help the colony expand its manufacturing capabilities. The readings on her sensors made her pause and check the equipment twice. "That can't be right," she whispered, adjusting the long-range scanners. The energy patterns were unlike anything in the database. They were too organized, too purposeful, to be natural phenomena. Within minutes, her communication system buzzed with incoming calls from the orbital defense station. Captain Lee Do-hyun's voice crackled through the speakers, tense but controlled. "Dr. Kim, we're picking up multiple contacts approaching the system. Can you confirm what you're seeing from the surface?" Subin's fingers moved across her control panel, bringing up detailed readings. "I count at least 30 ships, Captain. Their energy output is massive. These aren't human vessels." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. First contact. After decades of searching the stars for other intelligent life, it had finally found them instead. Admiral Park Min-ho received the alert aboard his flagship, Seoul's Pride, as it patrolled the outer edges of the New Busan system. At 62 years old, he had served humanity's colonial expansion for over 3 decades. He had fought in the Mars Independence War, commanded the first deep space exploration missions, and overseen the establishment of 12 human colonies. Nothing in his experience had prepared him for this moment. "All ships, assume defensive positions around New Busan," he ordered, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had never lost a battle. "Alert all colonies in the sector. We may have visitors." The alien fleet dropped out of hyperspace with precision that spoke of advanced technology and military discipline. 30 massive vessels, each one larger than humanity's biggest dreadnoughts, arranged themselves in a perfect formation above New Busan's North Pole. Their hull designs were elegant yet intimidating, with flowing curves that seemed to shift and change in the light. For 6 hours, the two fleets faced each other in tense silence. The human ships looked tiny compared to the alien vessels, like fishing boats confronting battleships. Admiral Park Min-ho tried every communication frequency known to humanity, broadcasting messages of peace and welcome in dozens of languages. Finally, a response came. The voice that spoke was deep and resonant, translated by technology far more advanced than anything humans possessed. It spoke perfect Korean, then English, then Mandarin, cycling through human languages with casual ease. "I am War Speaker Threndok of the Velthok Confederation. You will identify yourselves and explain your presence in Confederation space." Admiral Park straightened in his command chair. This was the moment that would define humanity's future among the stars. "I am Admiral Park Min-ho of the Terran Colonial Defense Fleet. This is the human colony of New Busan, established 17 years ago. We come in peace and welcome contact with your people." "Peace," the alien voice repeated, and somehow it sounded amused. "Your kind speaks of peace while occupying sacred junction points that have belonged to the Confederation for 3,000 years. This system lies on the Thalamar hyperspace route, used by our merchants and pilgrims since before your species discovered fire." Dr. Kim Subin, monitoring the communication from her research station, felt her heart sink. The hyperspace junction. Her geological surveys had revealed unusual gravitational patterns in this system, but she had never imagined they might be significant to alien civilizations. "We were unaware of any prior claims to this system," Admiral Park replied carefully. "Our surveys showed no signs of intelligent activity. We would be happy to discuss arrangements that respect your historical claims while allowing our colony to continue." The silence that followed lasted for several minutes. When War Speaker Threndok spoke again, his tone had changed. It was colder now, final. "The Velthok Confederation has existed for 40,000 of your years. In that time, we have encountered 347 species across our territory. Some joined our confederation willingly, others required encouragement. All eventually understood their place in the galactic order." Admiral Park felt his stomach tighten. And what place would that be? Submission, order, peace through strength. The alien's voice carried absolute certainty. Your species shows promise. Your technology is primitive, but your expansion instinct is strong. The Confederation could find uses for humans as client species, perhaps in sectors where your particular biology would be advantageous. On New Busan's surface, Dr. Kim Subin watched her instruments as more alien ships appeared throughout the system. They were emerging near each of the 17 human colonies, not just New Busan. This wasn't a chance encounter. It was a coordinated operation. However, War Speaker Threndok continued, your current position is unacceptable. You will withdraw all human presence from beyond your home solar system. You have 30 standard days to begin evacuation. Any human vessels or installations remaining outside the Sol system after this deadline will be destroyed. Captain Lee Do-hyun, commanding the orbital defense station, couldn't contain himself. You can't just demand we abandon our homes. These colonies represent decades of work, millions of people's lives. Captain, Admiral Park's voice cut through the channel, warning him to silence. But War Speaker Threndok had heard. Homes? These are not your homes, young human. These are temporary intrusions in Confederation space. The Velthok have been patient, allowing your expansion to continue while we observed your species. That patience has limits. The alien ship began broadcasting detailed information about each human colony. Population numbers, defensive capabilities, industrial output, trade routes. They had been watching humanity for years, maybe decades, cataloging their expansion like scientists studying bacteria in a petri dish. The colony you call New Incheon produces 847,000 tons of refined metals annually, the war speaker continued. New Gwangju houses 1.2 million humans in 17 population centers. New Daegu has established agricultural systems capable of feeding 2.3 million people. Impressive efficiency for such a young species. Admiral Park realized with growing horror that the aliens knew more about human colonies than Earth's own government did. They had been watched, studied, and judged without ever knowing it. Your evaluation period is complete, War Speaker Threndok announced. The Confederation has determined that humans possess sufficient intelligence to serve useful functions within our empire. However, your current independence is disruptive to galactic order. You will withdraw to your home system and await further instructions regarding your integration into the Confederation. And if we refuse? Admiral Park asked, though he already knew the answer. Refusal is not an option that ends well for newly contacted species. The Krethnar of the Andromeda Spiral refused our generous offer 18,000 years ago. Their homeworld is now a memorial garden, beautiful in its way. The transmission ended abruptly, leaving the human fleet in stunned silence. Around New Busan, the alien ships began moving into what were clearly siege positions. Similar reports flooded in from the other 16 colonies. Humanity had been surrounded without ever knowing they were being hunted. Dr. Kim Subin sat in her laboratory, staring at the soil samples that had seemed so important just hours ago. Everything had changed. The dreams of expansion, of building new worlds among the stars had collided with a reality far harsher than anyone had imagined. Her communication system chimed. It was her daughter Mina calling from New Gwangju, where she worked as an environmental engineer. Mom, what's happening? The news feeds are saying aliens have surrounded all the colonies. Is it true? Subin looked out her window at the massive alien ships hanging motionless in the sky like dark clouds promising storms. Yes, honey, it's true. What are we going to do? It was the question everyone across 17 colonies was asking. What could humanity do against a civilization that had existed for 40,000 years, that commanded fleets large enough to surround every human settlement simultaneously? Admiral Park called an emergency session of the Colonial Defense Council, bringing together representatives from every human world. The debate that followed was unlike anything in human history. Some colonies, led by New Mokpo's governor, argued for immediate compliance. The aliens were clearly more advanced, more powerful. Resistance would mean extinction. Others, particularly the mining worlds that had invested everything in deep space, operations refused to consider abandonment. Colony Director Choi Hyun-woo of New Incheon spoke for many when he said, These worlds aren't just investments or territories. They're home to millions of people. We've built lives here, raised families, created communities. You can't just ask people to throw that away because some alien empire claims prior rights. Ambassador Han Jisu, Earth's chief diplomatic representative, tried to find middle ground. Perhaps we can negotiate, offer compensation, or agree to shared administration of the disputed systems. Diplomacy has solved territorial disputes before. This isn't a territorial dispute, Captain Lee Do-hyun interjected from New Busan's orbital station. This is conquest. They're not interested in negotiations, they want submission. The first shots of the war came at exactly 03:47 hours, Earth Standard Time, when the Velthok fleet at New Mokpo opened fire without warning. The colony's defense satellites, built to handle asteroid threats and space debris, lasted exactly 14 seconds against alien plasma cannons. Captain Yoon Ji-won was asleep in his quarters aboard the light cruiser Daegu's Honor when the attack began. The ship's alarm system woke him with urgent blasts, but by the time he reached the bridge, New Mokpo was already falling. "Report," he demanded, strapping himself into his pilot's chair. 3 Velthok ships are bombarding the orbital stations. His tactical officer replied, her voice tight with shock. "The Mokpo defense platform is gone. The civilian evacuation ships never had a chance to launch." Through the main viewer, Yoon could see the alien weapons at work. Streams of blue-white energy lanced down from orbit, turning the colony's industrial centers into expanding balls of superheated gas. Each shot was precise, targeted, devastating. This wasn't random destruction. The Velthok were systematically dismantling humanity's presence in the system. "All ships, attack formation," Admiral Park Min-ho's voice crackled across the fleet communication channel. "Target the lead Velthok vessel. Show them we're not going down without a fight." The human defense fleet consisted of 12 ships, ranging from heavy cruisers like Seoul's Pride to small patrol vessels barely larger than shuttles. Against the 30 alien warships, they looked pathetically inadequate, but they attacked anyway. Captain Yoon's squadron of 6 fighter craft launched from Daegu's Honor, their fusion drives pushing them toward the alien fleet at maximum acceleration. Behind them, the human capital ships opened fire with railguns, plasma cannons, and nuclear missiles. The results were devastating, but not in the way humanity had hoped. The Velthok ships absorbed the human weapons fire without visible effect. Energy shields flickered briefly around their hulls, then returned to normal. The aliens' defensive technology was so advanced that humanity's most powerful weapons barely registered as threats. The return fire was a different story entirely. The heavy cruiser Busan's Hope took a direct hit from an alien plasma cannon and simply ceased to exist. One moment it was there, all 800 meters and 50,000 tons of human engineering. The next moment there was only expanding debris and superheated gas. "Holy shit," someone whispered across the communication channel. "Captain." Yoon forced himself to focus on his approach run. His fighters were small enough that the alien ships might not consider them priority targets. If he could get close enough, maybe the smaller craft could find weak points in the enemy defenses. "Red Squadron, follow my lead," he ordered, diving toward the nearest Velthok vessel. "Target their weapon ports. Even if we can't hurt them, we can try to blind them." The alien ship grew larger in his view screen, its hull covered in patterns that seemed to shift and flow like living metal. As he closed to attack range, Yoon realized that the ship was easily 3 times larger than Seoul's Pride. It was like a fighter attacking a space station. His missiles struck the alien hull and detonated harmlessly against the energy shields. But in the brief moment when the shields flared, Yoon caught a glimpse of something important. The defensive barrier wasn't uniform. It was weaker at certain points, particularly where the ship's hull curved sharply. "All fighters, focus on the shield generators," he broadcast. "Look for the curved sections near the engine ports." Before he could press his attack, warning alarms flooded his cockpit. An alien fighter had appeared on his sensors, moving with impossible speed and agility. Yoon threw his craft into evasive maneuvers, but the alien pilot matched every move effortlessly. The dogfight lasted less than 30 seconds. Yoon's fighter exploded in a ball of flame, taking with it humanity's First tactical insight into Veilthok technology. The battle at New Mokpo was over within 2 hours. The human defense fleet was completely destroyed, the orbital installations reduced to debris, and the colony's surface burned clean of all human presence. War Speaker Threndok's message to the surviving colonies was simple. This is what defiance earns you. But humanity's response surprised the Veilthok. Instead of surrendering, the remaining colonies began preparing for war. On New Incheon, Colony Director Choi Hyun-woo converted the mining operations equipment into weapons manufacturing. The massive strip mining lasers were reconfigured as defensive cannons. The ore processing facilities began producing armor plating and hull materials. Within days, the colony had transformed from a peaceful mining operation into an armed fortress. They want a war, Director Choi told his defense council. Then we'll give them one they won't forget. Engineer Onari, who had spent 15 years designing equipment to extract rare metals from asteroids, found herself tasked with building weapons capable of hurting alien starships. She studied the tactical data from New Mokpo's destruction, analyzing every sensor reading and combat recording that had survived. The problem is their shields, she explained to a room full of miners turned soldiers. Our energy weapons can't penetrate them. But look at this. She displayed a slow-motion recording of Yoon Ji-won's final attack run. In the brief moment when his missiles impacted the alien hull, the shields had flickered. They're designed to absorb energy, Onari continued. Plasma, lasers, particle beams. But what about pure kinetic force? What if we hit them with something solid? Something moving fast enough to deliver massive impact energy? The miners understood immediately. They had been using kinetic impactors to break apart asteroids for years. The principle was simple. Accelerate a dense object to enormous velocity and let physics do the rest. How fast would we need to go? Director Choi asked. Onari's calculations were sobering. At least 30% of light speed, maybe more. We'd need a railgun system larger than anything humanity has ever built. Then we build it. Similar preparations were taking place across the remaining colonies. On New Daegu, the agricultural processing centers were converted to manufacture explosive compounds. New Gwangju's environmental engineering teams began designing trap systems using the planet's natural cave networks. New Busan's research facilities worked around the clock to develop new communication technologies that could coordinate defensive efforts across multiple star systems. The Veilthok, meanwhile, were discovering that occupying human space was more complicated than destroying it. War Speaker Threndok had expected immediate surrender after the demonstration at New Mokpo. In his experience, most species became reasonable once they witnessed Confederation power firsthand. But the humans were not responding according to established patterns. Instead of capitulating, they were evacuating non-essential personnel and fortifying their positions. Instead of seeking negotiations, they were manufacturing weapons. Most, disturbing of all, they were sharing their defensive plans openly across communication channels, as if they didn't care that the Veilthok could intercept every message. Perhaps they are too primitive to understand their situation, suggested Sub-Commander Velthar during a strategy meeting aboard the Confederation flagship. Their communications security is non-existent. They broadcast their defensive plans on open channels. War Speaker Threndok considered this. The humans did seem remarkably careless with their communications, but something about their behavior troubled him. In 40,000 years of Confederation expansion, he had never encountered a species that prepared for war while ignoring basic operational security. His concerns proved justified when the real attacks began. The first hit came at New Jeonju, where the Veilthok had established an orbital monitoring station to observe human surrender negotiations. The station simply exploded without warning, taking its crew of 200 Veilthok personnel with it. Investigation revealed that a human cargo vessel had approached under a flag of truce, ostensibly carrying surrender documents. Instead, it had carried a massive fusion bomb that detonated at point-blank range. The second attack targeted a Veilthok supply convoy traveling between New Andong and New Mokpo. 3 human ships, appearing to be damaged refugees fleeing the war zone, approached the convoy requesting assistance. When the Veilthok vessels extended their shields to protect the apparently helpless humans, The refugee ships revealed themselves to be packed with kinetic impactors that fired at close range. The third attack was the most audacious. A human diplomatic vessel requested permission to approach Warspeaker Threndok's flagship under a ceasefire flag. Ambassador Han Jisoo herself was aboard, ready to discuss surrender terms. The Valthok, following established diplomatic protocols, allowed the ship to approach and dock. Ambassador Han met with Warspeaker Threndok in his private chambers, where she spent 2 hours discussing the terms of human capitulation. Everything seemed normal until the ambassador triggered the remote detonator hidden in her diplomatic's briefcase tie. Warspeaker Threndok survived only because Valthok military leaders wore personal force fields during all meetings with hostile species. Ambassador Han was not so fortunate. But the explosion crippled the flagship's command center and killed 17 senior Valthok officers. "They're fighting without honor," Sub-Commander Velthar protested after the attacks. "Suicide missions? False flags, terrorist tactics, this isn't warfare, it's madness." But Warspeaker Threndok was beginning to. 6 months after New Mokpo burned, the war had changed into something no one had expected. The galaxy's most powerful empire found itself hunting shadows, while humans learned to fight like ghosts. Captain Kang Minjin crouched in the maintenance tunnel of what had once been New Daegu's central processing plant. Around him, 12 other humans waited in the darkness, listening to the heavy footsteps of Valthok soldiers searching the facility above. The aliens had taken New Daegu 3 months ago, but they had never truly controlled it. The colony's 800,000 residents had vanished into caves, abandoned mining shafts, and hidden facilities scattered across the planet's surface. The Valthok occupied the major installations, but everything else belonged to the Resistance. "Movement. On level 3, whispered Park Soyoung, monitoring Valthok communications through her modified radio equipment. She had been a communications engineer before the war, maintaining the quantum transmitters that kept the colonies connected. Now she used those same skills to intercept alien messages and coordinate resistance activities. Captain Kang checked. His weapon, a mining laser modified with focusing crystals salvaged from the planet's destroyed orbital defense platforms. It wasn't much against Valthok armor, but it was better than nothing. The plan was simple. Hit the facility's main power generator, destroy as much equipment as possible, and disappear before the aliens could respond. They had done it dozens of times across New Daegu, each attack smaller but more annoying than the last. "Remember," Kang whispered to his team, "we're not trying to win a battle. We're trying to make them wish they had never come here." The attack went perfectly. Kang's team emerged from the tunnels, destroyed 3 power generators and a communications relay, then vanished back underground before the Valthok guards knew what was happening. By the time alien reinforcements arrived, the humans had disappeared, like smoke. It was a tiny victory in a war that humanity was clearly losing, but across 17 star systems, thousands of similar tiny victories were adding up to something larger. Dr. Bei Yujin studied the psychological profiles from her hidden laboratory in the Kepler sector. Before the war, she had been New Soul's chief psychiatrist, helping colonists adapt to life in deep space. Now she analyzed intercepted Valthok communications, looking for signs of stress and weakness in the enemy forces. What she found was fascinating. "They're showing classic symptoms of occupational stress disorder," she explained to Admiral Park Minho during a secret meeting aboard a converted mining vessel. "The Valthok military isn't designed for long-term occupation duties. Their entire tactical doctrine is based on quick victories followed by peaceful administration." Admiral Park, now 73 and commanding the resistance from mobile headquarters that moved constantly through asteroid fields, leaned forward with interest. "Explain." "Look at these communication intercepts," Dr. Bei said, displaying Valthok military messages on her portable screen. 6 months ago, their reports were confident and professional. Now they're showing signs of paranoia, frustration, and unit cohesion problems. She highlighted several messages where Valthok commanders complained about unpredictable human attacks, equipment failures caused by sabotage, and the constant stress of never knowing when the next strike would come. They've conquered hundreds, of species over 40,000 years, Dr. Bay continued. But every previous conquest followed the same pattern. Overwhelming force demonstration, immediate surrender, peaceful integration. The humans are the first species that didn't surrender after the demonstration phase. Admiral Park smiled grimly. It was the first good news he had heard in months. The resistance strategy was working, but it came at enormous cost. The human colonies were ruins, their populations scattered and hiding. Millions of people lived in caves, abandoned mines, and improvised shelters, surviving on stockpiled supplies and whatever they could steal from Valtok installations. On New Inchin, engineer Onari had turned the planet's extensive tunnel system into a weapons factory. Her team of miners and engineers worked around the clock, producing the modified kinetic weapons that had become humanity's most effective anti-ship technology. The key is resonance frequency, she explained to a group of resistance fighters, gathered in what had once been the colony's main conference room. Now it was a cave lit by stolen Valthok power cells. Their shields are tuned to absorb specific energy patterns, but if we can hit them with kinetic impactors at just the right frequency, she demonstrated with a small model, showing how repeated impacts at precise intervals could cause the shield generators to overload. It required perfect timing and coordination, but it worked. We've destroyed 6 Valthok ships using this technique, Onari continued. It's not much, but it proves they can be hurt. More importantly, it proved that humans could learn and adapt faster than the aliens expected. Lieutenant Park So-young had developed something even more valuable than weapons, a communication network that the Valthok couldn't detect or intercept. Working with quantum physicists from New Busan's research facilities, she created a system that used quantum entanglement to link resistance cells across multiple star systems. The communications were instantaneous, undetectable, and impossible to jam or trace. It's like having a conversation across the galaxy, she explained to Captain Kang's team as they planned their next operation. The Valthok can't hear us, can't track us, and can't predict what we're going to do next. The psychological impact was enormous. For the first time since the war began, human resistance cells could coordinate their attacks across vast distances. What appeared to be random acts of sabotage were actually carefully planned operations designed to maximize damage while minimizing risk. The Valthok began to realize they were facing an opponent unlike any in their experience. War Speaker Threndok stood in the command center of his new flagship, studying tactical displays that showed human resistance activity across occupied space. Red markers indicated confirmed attacks, yellow markers showed suspected resistance cells, and orange markers highlighted areas where Valthok forces had lost contact with headquarters. There were thousands of markers. Sub-Commander Velthar, he called. Status report on Sector 7. Another supply convoy attacked, sir. Third one this month. The humans used modified cargo ships loaded with kinetic impactors. They destroyed 2 escort vessels before our reinforcements arrived. And the attackers? Escaped, sir. They always escape. That was the most frustrating aspect of fighting humans. They didn't seem interested in holding territory or winning decisive battles. They struck quickly, caused as much damage as possible, then vanished before the Valthok could retaliate. Effectively. Perhaps we should increase patrols in the asteroid belts, suggested Sub-Commander Velthar. The humans seem to use them as hiding places. War Speaker Threndok considered this, then shook his head. The asteroid belts in this sector contain over 200,000 objects larger than a small ship. We would need the entire Confederation fleet to patrol them effectively. It was a sobering realization. The Valthok had overwhelming superiority in any direct battle, but the humans refused to fight direct battles. Instead, they fought from the shadows, using the vast emptiness of space itself as their ally. The breakthrough came when Dr. Bei Yujin intercepted a series of messages between Valthok civilian administrators and their military commanders. They're asking to be transferred to other sectors, she reported excitedly during another clandestine meeting with Admiral Park. The occupation forces are requesting reassignment to what they call normal conquest zones. This was unprecedented in Confederation history. Military personnel were volunteering for combat duty in active war zones rather than remaining in pacified, human space. More importantly, Dr. Bay continued, they're starting to make mistakes. Look at this patrol schedule they transmitted in the clear. The schedule showed Veilthok shipping routes, defense patrol patterns, and supply depot locations. Information that should have been classified was being broadcast openly because the aliens were becoming careless under stress. Admiral Park studied the intelligence data carefully. An idea was forming, something audacious and potentially suicidal. But then, most of humanity's effective tactics had been audacious and potentially suicidal. Contact all resistance cells, he ordered. We're going to try something new. The attack that followed became known as the Week of Fire. Coordinated through Lieutenant Park So-young's quantum communication network, human resistance cells across 17 star systems struck simultaneously. At predetermined targets on New Daegu, Captain Kang's team destroyed the main Veilthok administrative center. On New Incheon, Engineer O's fighters used her resonance frequency weapons to destroy an entire supply depot. On New Gwangju, resistance fighters collapsed a tunnel system directly beneath a Veilthok military base, burying 300 alien soldiers. Similar attacks occurred across human space, each one timed to happen within a 6-hour window. To the eye, Veilthok, it appeared that humanity had suddenly multiplied its forces 100-fold. The psychological impact was devastating. Veilthok commanders found themselves facing enemies who seemed to be everywhere at once, who could coordinate attacks across interstellar distances, and who struck with perfect timing despite having no apparent communication. 18 months after the first Veilthok ultimatum, humanity struck its first blow against the alien homeworld itself. Admiral Shin Tae-hyun watched from the bridge of his modified cargo vessel as New Terra's surface burned in the distance. The Veilthok colony world had been completely unprepared for attack. Why would they be? For 40,000 years, no enemy had ever penetrated deep enough into Confederation space to threaten their core worlds. Until now. Tactical report, Admiral, Shin ordered, his voice calm despite the magnitude of what they had just accomplished. 17 manufacturing facilities destroyed, sir, replied his tactical officer, Commander Lim Kyungmin. The orbital shipyard is completely gone. We've crippled their fighter production for this entire sector. The attack had taken 8 months to plan and execute. Shin's raiders had traveled through hyperspace routes that the Veilthok considered too dangerous for regular traffic using modified navigation systems designed by the best human engineers. They had emerged from hyperspace directly above New Terra, struck with overwhelming force and disappeared before the planet's defenders could mount an effective response. It was exactly the kind of attack that the Veilthok had been using against human colonies for over a year. Now they knew how it felt to be on the receiving end. Signal the fleet, Admiral Shin ordered. We're withdrawing to Rally Point Delta. Time to show them that nowhere in their empire is safe. The success at New Terra was possible because humanity had finally received help from an unexpected source. The Kethvar Commonwealth. Agent Moon Hana stood in the shadows of the Kethvar embassy on the neutral world of Gamma Station, waiting for her contact to arrive. For 6 months, she had been working to build relationships with alien species that were growing tired of Veilthok domination. The Kethvar were perfect allies for humanity's purposes. Their species had developed advanced stealth technology and held detailed star charts of Confederation space. More importantly, they were one of the few civilizations that had successfully resisted Veilthok conquest in the past. Agent Moon, a voice whispered in accented English. Ambassador Krelthy emerged from the diplomatic section, her forearms carrying data storage devices that contained the most valuable intelligence humanity had ever received. The hyperspace routes you requested, Krelthy said, passing the storage devices to Moon. Complete navigation data for 12 systems that the Confederation considers secure. Our gift to your resistance. Why are you helping us? Moon asked. It wasn't the first time she had wondered about Kethvar motivations. Krelthy's expression was unreadable by human standards, but her voice carried genuine emotion. Because your species has done something we thought impossible. You have made the Veilthok doubt themselves. For the first time in thousands of years, they are afraid. She was right. Throughout Confederation space, reports were spreading of human attacks on supposedly secure installations. The raids were small in scale but enormous in psychological impact. If humans could strike at New Terra, no Veilthok world was truly safe. Intelligence that Agent Moon gathered allowed humanity to plan increasingly ambitious operations. The next target was a Veilthok research facility in the Proxima sector, where the aliens were developing new shield technologies specifically designed to counter human kinetic weapons. Commander Lim Kyungmin led the assault personally, using a new type of ship that represented the evolution of human military thinking. Instead of trying to build vessels that could match Veilthok technology, humanity had created something entirely different. Small, fast ships that carried single devastating weapons. Remember, Lim told his pilots as they approached the research station, "We're not trying to capture anything, we're here to destroy their ability to adapt to our weapons." The attack lasted exactly 17 minutes. Lim's squadron of 30 fighters swarmed the research station, overwhelming its defenses through sheer numbers. Each ship carried a single kinetic impactor tuned to the resonance frequency that engineer Onari had discovered. Together, they turned the station into expanding debris. But the most important victory of the raid wasn't the destruction of the facility. It was the capture of Dr. Zethral, the Veilthok scientist who had been leading their shield research. Dr. Bei Yujin interrogated the prisoner in a hidden facility deep in the asteroid belt. What she learned changed everything about humanity's understanding of their enemy. "The Confederation is not as unified as they appear," Dr. Bei reported to Admiral Park Minho during their next strategic meeting. Dr. Zethral revealed that there are significant political tensions within their government. Many client species serve the Confederation only because they fear the alternative. This was the opening that humanity had been searching for. If the Confederation's power was based on fear rather than loyalty, then demonstrating Veilthok vulnerability might cause their empire to fragment. "What did you learn about their military capabilities?" Admiral Park asked. "They have approximately 200,000 ships spread across their territory," Dr. Bei replied. "That sounds overwhelming, but it's actually a weakness. They're spread so thin that they can't concentrate forces without leaving other areas undefended." Admiral Park studied the strategic implications. Humanity had perhaps 3,000 ships total, most of them converted civilian vessels with improvised weapons. But if they could force the Veilthok to disperse their forces even further, "We need to expand our operations," he decided. "Hit more targets, spread them out across a wider area, make them think we have 10 times as many ships as we actually." The strategy worked better than anyone expected. Over the following months, human raiders struck at Veilthok installations across 50 different star systems. Each attack was small, usually involving no more than a dozen ships, but the cumulative effect was enormous. Veilthok fleet commanders found themselves trying to guard against enemies who could appear anywhere without warning. They were forced to spread their forces across hundreds of potential targets, weakening their ability to respond to any single attack. Meanwhile, something even more significant was happening. Other alien species were beginning to rebel against Confederation rule. It started on Veltar Prime, where the native population had served as laborers in Veilthok mining operations for over a century. When they learned that humans had successfully attacked New Terra itself, they began their own uprising. The Veltaran rebellion was quickly crushed by Confederation forces, but the symbolism was powerful. For the first time in thousands of years, a client species had openly defied their Veilthok masters. Similar uprisings began occurring throughout Confederation space. None of them were successful individually, but together they represented a threat that the Veilthok had never faced before. The possibility that their entire empire might collapse from within. Agent Moon Hana worked tirelessly to coordinate with these rebel movements. Her network of contacts grew to include dozens of species, from the aquatic Murthai to the crystalline Sildrak. Each species had their own grievances against the Confederation, their own reasons for wanting freedom. "We're building something unprecedented," she reported during a secret meeting with resistance leaders. "A coalition of species united in opposition to Confederation rule. If we can coordinate our efforts." The idea was audacious, a galaxy-wide rebellion that would make Veilthok rule impossible to maintain. But first, humanity needed to prove that the Confederation could be defeated in direct battle. That opportunity came when the Veilthok decided to make their own desperate gambit. War Speaker Threndok, under enormous pressure from his superiors, committed the Confederation's entire strategic reserve to a final assault on the human stronghold at New Sol. New Sol was the largest human colony still holding out against Veilthok occupation. Its 2.3 million inhabitants had been under siege for over a year, surviving in underground cities while human raiders used the planet as a staging base for attacks throughout the sector. "They're committing everything," Admiral Shin Tai-hyun reported, as he monitored the massive alien fleet approaching New Sol. Over 2,000 ships, including their newest and most powerful vessels. They want to end this war with one decisive blow. Admiral Park Min-ho, now nearly 75 and showing the strain of 2 years of constant warfare, faced the most difficult decision of his career. New Sol's defenses were strong, but they couldn't withstand an assault by the Confederation's entire reserve fleet. "We have two choices," he told his senior commanders. "Evacuate the planet and preserve our forces, or make our stand here and risk everything on one battle." The decision was made by the people of New Sol themselves. In a planet-wide referendum, they voted overwhelmingly to fight rather than flee. They had built their homes among the stars, and they would not abandon them without a battle. "Then we fight," Admiral Park decided. "Signal all human forces throughout the sector, every ship, every fighter, every modified cargo hauler with improvised weapons. We're going to show the galaxy what happens when you push humanity too far." Battle of New Sol lasted 6 days and became the turning point of the war. The Veilthok opened with overwhelming orbital bombardment, trying to crush the planet's defenses through sheer firepower. But the humans had learned from 18 months of warfare. Instead of meeting the aliens in direct battle, they used the planet's geography. 2.5 years after the Veilthok ultimatum, the galaxy was burning. President Kim Woo-jin stood before the newly formed Galactic Liberation Council, looking out at representatives from 43 different species. The meeting hall on Neutral, Kethvar Station buzzed with dozens of different languages as the most unprecedented alliance in galactic history prepared for its final offensive. "Friends," President Kim began, his words translated instantly into every language present, "we gather here not as conquerors but as liberators. The Veilthok Confederation has ruled through fear and oppression for 40,000 years. Today, we end their empire forever." The applause that followed came from beings as different as the aquatic Merthai, whose gills fluttered with excitement, and the crystalline Sildrak, whose bodies chimed like musical instruments. Humanity had done more than survive the Veilthok assault. They had inspired the greatest rebellion in galactic history, but the hardest fighting still lay ahead. General Yu Seo-hyun, now commanding the combined liberation forces, presented the final battle plan to the assembled alliance. Operation Homecoming would strike directly at the Veilthok home system, targeting not just their military forces but the government that had oppressed hundreds of species for millennia. The Confederation has withdrawn most of their remaining fleets to defend their core worlds, she explained, highlighting star charts that showed the disposition of enemy forces. They have approximately 85,000 ships concentrated in a sphere around their home system. Our combined forces number 127,000, vessels from 43 different species. The numbers looked favorable, but everyone knew that Veilthok ships were individually superior to most of their opponents. This would be the largest space battle in galactic history, and its outcome would determine the future of hundreds of billions of beings. Captain Park Min-ho Jr., the Admiral's son, commanded humanity's contribution to the Liberation Fleet. At 32, he had spent his entire adult life fighting the Veilthok. Unlike his father's generation, who had been forced to learn warfare through desperation, Min-ho Jr. had been trained from the beginning to fight aliens with superior technology. His flagship, New Earth's Vengeance, represented the pinnacle of human engineering combined with technology shared by their alien allies. Kethvar stealth systems, Merthai energy shields, Sildrak quantum computers, and human kinetic weapons created a vessel unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. "All human squadrons, report status," he ordered as the Liberation Fleet prepared to jump into hyperspace. The response was a symphony of voices from officers who had grown up in the shadow of war. These were the children of the resistance, raised in asteroid bases and hidden colonies, trained to fight from the moment they could walk. Storm Squadron ready, sir. 48 fighters armed with Nari-class kinetic torpedoes. Thunder Squadron ready. 60 modified cargo haulers with ramming charges. Lightning Squadron ready. 36 fast attack vessels with Kethvar cloaking fields. Each squadron represented a different aspect of humanity's evolution during the war. Storm Squadron used the kinetic weapons that engineer Onari had perfected. Thunder Squadron carried the suicide attack traditions that had terrorized Velthok forces since the war's beginning. Lightning Squadron embodied the hit-and-run tactics that had made human raiders the nightmare of the Confederation. Admiral Park Minho, now 77 and serving as strategic advisor to the Liberation Fleet, watched his son prepare for the battle that would define their species' future. The old man had survived 3 years of warfare that had killed millions of humans and fundamentally changed their civilization. You know, he said quietly to General Yu, when this started, we just wanted to keep our colonies. We never imagined we'd end up trying to reshape the galaxy. General Yu smiled grimly. That's what happens when you refuse to surrender. One thing leads to another. The hyperspace jump to the Velthok home system took 18 hours, during which the Liberation Fleet traveled through dimensions that existed outside normal space. When they emerged, they found themselves facing the most heavily defended star system in the galaxy. The Velthok homeworld of Thokvar was protected by 3 rings of defensive installations, each ring containing thousands of automated weapon, platforms, shield generators, and sensor arrays. Beyond the fixed defenses, the Confederation's remaining fleet waited in perfect formation. War Speaker Threndok, now Supreme Commander of all Velthok forces, studied the Liberation Fleet through his tactical displays. The alien alliance was larger than his remaining forces, but he still held advantages in individual ship quality and defensive positioning. So, he murmured to his staff, the humans have convinced half the galaxy to join their rebellion. Impressive, in its way. His aide, Sub-Commander Velthar, looked nervous. Sir, should we attempt to negotiate? Perhaps we could offer the humans better terms. Negotiate? Threndok's voice carried dark amusement. After 3 years of warfare? After the humans have inspired 43 species to rebellion? No, old friend. This ends only one way. Either the Confederation crushes this alliance, or the galaxy enters a new age without us. The battle began with the Liberation Fleet's assault on the outer defensive ring. Human raiders, now supported by Kethvar stealth ships and Murthai energy projectors, swept through the automated defenses like a tide of destruction. Captain Park Minho Jr. led the vanguard assault, his squadron of human fighters weaving between defensive installations with the skill born of years of desperate combat. Behind them came the Sildrak crystalline ships, their forms refracting laser fire into rainbow displays of deadly beauty. Target the shield generators, Minho Jr. ordered. Once their defenses are down, the capital ships can move in. The human tactics that had evolved during 3 years of guerrilla warfare proved devastatingly effective against fixed defenses. Instead of trying to destroy the installations through brute force, the raiders disabled key systems and moved on, leaving the defensive ring crippled, but not completely destroyed. Within 6 hours, the Liberation Fleet had penetrated the outer defenses and was engaging the middle ring. But this was where the Velthok sprung their trap. The middle defensive ring wasn't just automated weapons, it was also home to 30,000 Velthok fighters, piloted by the best warriors in the Confederation. When the Liberation Fleet committed to attacking the fixed installations, the alien fighters swarmed out to meet them. The dogfight that followed involved over 100,000 small craft from dozens of species. Human fighters, with their desperate courage and improvised weapons, clashed with Velthok pilots who had trained for decades in the galaxy's finest military academies. Commander Lim Kyungmin, now leading humanity's elite Ghost Squadron, found himself in personal combat with a Velthok ace, whose ship bore the markings of 50 kills. The alien pilot was skilled, experienced, and flying technology superior to anything humanity had produced. But Lim had something the Valthok pilot lacked: the absolute certainty that he was fighting for freedom rather than conquest. The dogfight lasted 20 minutes and covered thousands of kilometers of space. In the end, Lim's human ingenuity and desperation overcame Valthok's skill and technology. His kinetic torpedo, fired at point-blank range, punched through the alien fighter's shields and ended the career of one of the Confederation's best pilots. Similar battles raged throughout the middle defensive ring as pilots from 43 species fought for the future of the galaxy. The Liberation forces took heavy casualties, but their diversity proved to be a decisive advantage. Every time the Valthok adapted to one species' tactics, another species would attack from an unexpected angle. General Yu Seohyun coordinated the assault from her command ship, watching as the middle defensive ring slowly crumbled under the Liberation fleet's combined assault. But she knew the hardest fighting was yet to come. "All capital ships prepare for final assault," she ordered. "We're going straight for the Valthok home fleet." The inner defensive ring around Thokvar was different from the outer two. Instead of automated weapons, it consisted entirely of Valthok warships arranged in interlocking fields of fire. These were the survivors of the Confederation's once mighty fleet, veterans of 40,000 years of conquest. War Speaker Threndok commanded the defense personally from his flagship, the ancient dreadnought Eternal Dominion. The massive vessel had served as the symbol of Valthok power for over 10,000 years, participating in the conquest of hundreds of species. "Today we make our final stand," he announced to his fleet. "If we fall, the Confederation dies with us. If we victory, the galaxy returns to proper order. There is no middle ground." The capital ship engagement that followed dwarfed every previous battle of the war. Massive dreadnoughts from a dozen species exchanged fire across thousands of kilometers of space. Energy beams capable of melting asteroids crossed paths with kinetic projectiles, moving at significant fractions of light speed. Admiral Park Min-ho, commanding from the human flagship Soul's Pride, watched his son lead the human fleet into the heart of the enemy formation. The young captain's ship, New Earth's Vengeance, was targeted by 6 Valthok heavy cruisers simultaneously, but its combination of human engineering and alien technology allowed it to survive the concentrated fire. "All human vessels, execute Alpha Strike,"